other office today. So the question is your local government school, sometimes called public school, a constitution-free zone? We are currently in our underground bunker, although here in Pueblo, although I'm obviously outside right now in the Ho. And I learned that the schools that we have been supporting through tax money the past few years, and I was hoping to get, I guess, some return on that. And I had a couple of my kids in the sports, a sports program. And actually, they've changed things here in Pueblo so that you can have your kids in homeschool. You can do homeschool, but you can take a couple of classes and you can do sports. And we just thought that would be wonderful because um, it is really hard for them to sit all day in a classroom, and a lot of times they found that they didn't have stuff to do, or to just be there that whole day. So but they enjoyed taking the classes, and they've got good teachers and stuff, so everything is good. And we were just going to do some sports, but we've learned that the sports require them to run. Well, I told you a little bit about one of the sports the other day that requires you to put on a wet mask and keep it on your face, which is extremely dangerous. And then now another sport we were looking at, they went to practice, and everything was fine, but guess what? They must wear a mask during warm up for the sport, and the mask has to be on while they're running. Dangerous, right? Now, you know, if I said last year at this time, I really don't want my kids to be wearing a mask while running, I bet probably 99% of people in the world would have been like, yeah, of course you don't. That's not good for them. They can't fully breathe. You're sucking in a lot of whatever the mask is made of. I mean, so many reasons that's not good for you, but running requires you to breathe air fast, and have, I mean, it's heavier breathing than you just do in a normal situation. So that seems especially dangerous, but that doesn't seem to bother a lot of people. It bothered us. We were told we could get an exemption form, which we did. And as it turns out, the exemption form is a medical exemption. So basically, we're going to have to find a doctor that will say that there's something wrong with my kids so that they can breathe normally. Now, nothing's changed since last year. There may be a new virus that may have killed some people, although the longer this thing goes on, the more highly suspect that actually seems. It really is. And if you don't think it's highly suspect, you need to do some research. But it so that I mean, we don't know anybody. We know people in across the country, really, but certainly in two states. And um, I know people who've tested positive. I've talked to y'all about the how the tests are run, so that they are designed to produce false positives. Well, that's not really true. They weren't designed to produce false positives, but in this scenario, they are pretty much designed to promote to there are a lot of false positives that can happen in the test. So the test is basically meaningless. It it says that you have some genetic material of some sort, Does it say that you have a VIRUS that the Center for Disease Creation couldn't find last July, when they couldn't find an isolate of it when they were looking for one to do a study? I don't know if I don't know about that. And I don't think that that's ever actually been proven, but we do know that it finds something and reports things as positive. And the correlation between those who have a positive test and those who actually get sick, I haven't really seen a lot of that correlation. I don't know. I think that one statistic I've heard is that 80% of people are, quote, asymptomatic, which is that, what we're dealing with now. This whole idea of being sick but having no symptoms. um, and I want to tell you what passes for science, and I'll get back to the school and Constitution issue. This is actually from the Atlantic. It came up on my feed when I was looking, and I thought, okay, I'll do it. I'll take the clickbait, and I did. But I'm not going to read the whole article. The Atlantic has been really excellent with propaganda for this whole psychological operation, and I used to really respect that magazine. I used to like the in-depth articles, or they seemed in-depth to me at the time, and maybe they were. It was, a few years ago. But now it's just really pushing this narrative. The narrative that I'm finding to be quite false in a lot of areas. Okay, but anyway, here's the first paragraph of that Atlantic article. In the fall of 2019, exactly 0 scientists were studying COVID-19 because no one knew the disease existed. Now, that was around the time of Event 201, by the way, which, if you haven't heard that, that was a planning event for what would happen if there were a beer virus. We'll call it that. I don't want to get this video deleted, but a beer virus, if there were a beer virus that took over the world and killed a bunch of people. That's what Event 201 was about. What would the planning be? That was happening in the fall of 2019, specifically in mid-October. The beer virus that causes it, SARS-CoV-2, had only recently jumped into humans and had been neither identified nor named. Now, that's probably true. It hadn't been identified nor named, and I don't think it has been yet. But I wanted to read that. That's the first 2 sentences. Is all I'm going to read. So if you haven't vomited yet. But it jumped into humans. Now, were I a thinking member of academia, which I used to be, or at least thought that I was, pretty thinking, I would say, wow, wonder how a beer virus jumps into a human. And that really hasn't been explained in a satisfactorily valid, and by satisfactory way, I mean, it hasn't been explained as using valid scientific evidence, as I like to say, valid scientific evidence. So it might have been explained away in some article. I saw an article the other day about explaining how the curfew helps the virus not to spread. It was pretty crazy. But anyway, how does it jump into humans? That should be something that somebody should really be investigating or asking questions about. And I'm not seeing a lot of that. A lot of people just believe that it went from, I believe, a bat to a human. Just because how those virus is jump around. I don't know. I mean, maybe they do, but again, valid scientific evidence. But people are accepting this, that they jumped into it. And a lot of people in academia read the Atlantic. I know that because I started reading it when I was in graduate school. I don't think I'd ever heard of it before. Um, and they're going to look and they're going to just accept, oh, it jumps into humans. It's like, how does it do that? Well, we know it doesn't do it at, 6 feet away, unless you're in Great Britain, and then it's 6 feet 6 inches away because it's 2 meters, right? So it jumps differently according to country. Um, okay, that's ridiculous nonsense, but because of that ridiculous nonsense, and because people are really heavily believing it and not questioning when they see that a VIRUS can jump into a human, as the Atlantic put it, I guess everything's gone crazy. And so it's okay now, whereas if we'd been a Muslim family and we had worn, face coverings or whatever, and my kids had gone last year and asked to do the sport, or started practicing. They really started practicing for it, and then they said, no, you can't wear that while you're running. And I'm guessing that most people would say, well, that's a civil rights lawsuit. Well, nothing's changed except the high level of propaganda. But the high level of propaganda has really, I almost want to say, it's put people in hypnosis. And if you are a thinking person and a researching person, you know exactly what I mean. It has put people in almost a state of hypnosis. So anyway, hoping to let our children breathe normally, as they've been doing pretty well actually for the past few years, since they've been alive, really. If that has to now get a medical exemption when someone is running, I think that the quote that's been attributed to former CIA director William Casey has now come true, which is, we'll know our disinformation program has been complete, when everything that everybody believes is false. It's like, well, okay, here are people in that are supposed to be taking care and helping children, and not only are they allowing this, they're promoting it, and they're not allowing anybody to say no. And that's where we get into the Constitution part. So I didn't feel, I mean, my kids have had, one of them's had 2 physicals. I didn't really feel like, taking them to the doctor again to diagnose them with something that they don't have so they can breathe oxygen. I mean, how convoluted is that? But oh, wow. So we have a religious belief against this. We very much believe, um, even my husband, I mean, it doesn't take a person you don't have to be a Christian to believe that God made us to breathe normally, and that we need to continue to do that, and not to put any kind of diaper, which is basically what it is, on our face, except in special circumstances. I mean, sometimes people have to get surgery. There have been some studies that say that, there's no more disease, or whatever they're supposed to do. They're actually supposed to keep in, stuff that spit, or facial hair or something like that from the surgeon, when your body is open. I mean, that's what traditionally they've been used for. This whole idea that they stop you from getting the flu is a rather new idea, and I'm not even sure it's really, pertinent. Using, once again, valid scientific evidence. Valid scientific evidence is not done, in my opinion, by a Center for Disease Creation that gets funding from pharmaceutical companies that are making money from the things that they come up with. Okay, I mean, you know, call me crazy, but anyway, so we decided to be quite honest and do a religious exemption. And we had done this also at the school for a different matter, and it was fine. But no, we learned today that the lawyer for the Pueblo school system has said that religious exemptions are not allowed, to which my husband made the comment that the Constitution does not apply in that school system. So I'm curious, you know, and that's true. I mean, in every place we have religious freedom. An emergency doesn't take that away. I don't know if this particular state is still in a state of emergency, so that I don't even know how many things of these things were valid in a state of emergency, but a state of emergency lasts like 60 days. It doesn't, you know, last indefinitely. But whatever the case, the religious exemption is not valid, which says that in that particular case, that the Constitution is not valid. I don't know. It's really hard for me to deal with that. You know, it was last spring, it was like every day there was some new bit of tyranny, and they've sort of let off the pedal on that. And now it's like, oh, every day, you know, you have to face something from the fallout of this, you know. Now, can I believe that kids' parents are letting them play sports with a mask on? No, I'm having a hard time believing that. In fact, when I was told, and I know I mentioned this in previous video, that there was a whole soccer team that decided to, I mean, the parents decided that they could play. I mean, two soccer teams playing each other, and they all had on masks running. So if you've got parents allowing that kind of thing, and coaches encouraging that kind of thing, and preachers not preaching against that kind of thing, just believing all this nonsense that a dirty, filthy face covering is going to save you from getting sick, when we've seen, and personally, just the opposite. And how many people do I know? Now, I don't know, you know, what has happened to a lot of the elderly that I knew that were in the nursing homes. I don't know. Who knows? Who knows what's happened to them? But, you know, among people, especially among people my kids' age, I mean, we know a lot of teens and young adults, and 0 people have died. 0 people have even tested positive that we know. Which is a meaningless thing anyway. So, but you know, and for that, parents and teachers are participating in this. Parents and teachers are abusing kids. Now, I don't want to say I can see just sitting in a classroom all day with masks, because that's also abuse. To me, it's satanic. And it's also it's wrong, and it deprives people of oxygen. Oh no, it doesn't. I always like to do that. Okay, even if you do that and you have holes in it, your hand, you know, it's still depriving you of oxygen at fully the way God intended. Okay, and that is a religious belief, and I don't think you have to be a Christian to have that belief. But you know what, it doesn't matter. They still require you to do that. Whereas, and to me, that seems wrong. And I don't know why parents are allowing their kids to do that. because it's, it seems very abusive to take away oxygen, even at a very slow pace. So, but let's say you're going to do it all day. Okay. Well, that makes sense. I mean, it doesn't make sense, but in the world that makes no sense, it makes some bit of sense. But then when you ask those same people who've been wearing a mask all day to go out and run, or to do other exercises where their heart rate goes up and you're obstructing their oxygen, how is that not abuse? How is that not dangerous? So the religious exemption was not honored for that. So, can we find somebody who's going to say that there's something wrong with our child because we want them to breathe oxygen fully? It's a constitution-free zone. And we know a little bit about this in California because they did a similar thing with the SB 2, trying to think of the number, but it was a state bill that ended up passing. And this was a few years ago. I think they were practicing for this stuff, and it ended up passing. And basically, the religious exemption for the VAXX and going to school was no longer honored. And California used to have a philosophical exemption, and then they added a whole bunch of the VAXX to the schedule. So maybe that sets some kind of precedent where the Constitution doesn't really exist in public school system. But we experienced that this morning. So, it's worth asking if your local public government school is a constitution-free zone, because I've very much found out that here in Pueblo, that it is a constitution-free zone, which is kind of interesting because, a lot of people probably teach the Constitution there. I think my kids have learned a little about it at that very school, and yet they're not honoring an exemption that aligns with the Constitution that we are allowed to have, and in fact supposed to be having. That just truly amazes me. And even, I mean, people I talk to, just normal people, one person who used to be an athletic director here in Pueblo said, no, that's dangerous. That's awful. I mean, he was, up until a few years ago, was an athletic director and could see that. But something's happening and people are hypnotized and put in a trance. Being out here, I don't have my Charles Bukowski stuff to read, which some of you might like and some of you might not, but I am going to end things today. I started things by reading that Atlantic article, which I'm probably not even going to link in the comments because I don't want to give them more traffic. I've already given them enough. You can look it up if you want to, but I will link to this blog, Anointed Journey, and it's by a woman whose daughter very clearly had a vaccine injury, and she writes, the mom who writes this blog writes quite eloquently about it, and it's really sad. Her daughter is about the same age as one of my kids, and it's just really, really sad. But she writes about it in a very eloquent way, and she sees through a lot of this because she's had to discover a lot of things, as a lot of us have. I mean, a lot of us have discovered a lot of stuff that we don't like and that maybe we've been lied to and that kind of thing, and we speak out, and then when we speak out, of course, a lot of times we're chastised. But I'm speaking the truth. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm going to read a little bit from this blog entry, but is actually not the mom whose blog it is. It's a guest post, but you'll see that from Maggie Montgomery. a wife, mother, patriot, and advocate for vaccine choice and medical freedom for nearly 2 decades. And it gives her link. So, and there's some cussing in here. Truly, at least 100 times a day, I think to myself, I'll remember every single person that dismissed me, rolled their eyes at me, called me a conspiracy theorist, and then decided to hide in their house and through willful ignorance systematically assisted our government in driving our country into the ground, laying waste to hundreds of thousands of American lives. I'll remember the tears of the father who buried his 12-year-old that committed suicide. I'll remember my friend's dad who died because he didn't go for those tests back in February and had a heart attack last month that could have been detected and prevented. I'll remember the countless testimonies of those who saved every dime and worked their fingers to the bone, and now their businesses and savings are gone. The list is long, but I'll stop there. And I'll remember every day dying a little more on the inside and thinking, when will my heart reach its limit before what's inside of me forces the rest of me to lay down and never get back up? This isn't normal, and it damn well should never be our new normal. You look at the same stats I do, and for F knows what reason, you nod your damn heads up and down and say, yeah, we should all stay home and wear a mask. Holy hell. Well, you better be damn sure you're right and it's not based on just what you picked up on the nightly news. You better take your lazy ass over to the computer and start looking up how viruses work, and then look at past epidemics and pandemics, death tolls, and then you better start looking at the motives behind the pros and the antis. No, it's not enough just to ask your doctor or your uncle who has a PhD in this or that science. You don't get to wash your hands of this mass destruction until you've exhausted the questions and the discrepancies. And you sure as hell don't get the right to tell me I'm selfish and without decency for not wearing a mask or complying with anything that lacks common sense. However, you do get to disagree with me after you have put the same countless hours and energy into thoroughly understanding why there are two strongly opposing sides to this debacle, as I have. Because, see here, I took it quite seriously when countless strangers told me I would be responsible for killing someone's grandmom. I also took it quite seriously when a friend told me that my negligence would cost my son a mother. So I cleared my mind of original thoughts and I dug and dug and dug some more, and I sat back and observed, and I read medical literature and studies until my eyes blurred and I could practically write a thesis. And in my attempts to prove my instincts wrong, I only proved them more right. I won't try to prove you wrong, and I won't insist you are wrong. I'll ask you to dig deep, look further than your TV screen, and prove to yourself that you aren't wrong. Because until that's done, no one gets to shake their head at anyone else. And then I suppose it's on me whether or not I can forgive you if you don't. That is beautiful. That is an essay just beautifully written because it spouts the truth, and I think that it tells what a lot of us are feeling, but we don't know how to articulate it. And I really appreciate it when someone articulates stuff for me that I have a hard time saying. It means a lot, and it took a lot for her to write that. And I do know about that because I have a master's degree in creative writing. So I do know a little bit about good writing. And that was honest and it was truthful. And it puts the onus on those people who are under hypnosis, or so it seems. Prove to me that you're not. But it puts the onus on them to prove that they need to, if they're going to do all this crazy stuff, that they need to justify it with valid scientific evidence. Okay, valid scientific evidence. Those are some 3 really awesome words. Okay, I hope that you do some investigating and start asking questions, and I hope you have a wonderful day.